Sailors are confined to small crowded spaces. They eat, sleep, and work with the same crew for months on end. It is therefore an understatement that the relationships between the crew and the officers are integral to the success of any voyage. Furthermore, a hierarchy of the crew members is established on shipping vessels to maintain order to ensure success of the mission. However, when an officer or two are replaced, the normal dynamics of the ship can be disrupted, leading to disastrous results. This is the story of the lost crew of the Carrol A. Deering. On January 29, 1921, Cape Lookout Lightship was sailing off the coast of North Carolina when the crew noticed an approaching 5-masted schooner. The approaching schooner held the lightship. It just so happened that the radio on the lightship was out, so Captain Jacobson took to the deck to try to communicate with the approaching vessel. A tall, thin man with reddish-brown hair spoke through a megaphone. In a thick accent and broken English, he yelled that the vessel, the Carrol A. Deering, had lost its anchors in a storm off Cape Fear and told Jacobson to notify the owner of the boat, the G.G. Deering Company. Captain Jacobson wrote down the message, but was caught off guard by what he was seeing. He was a very experienced captain and noticed several things that were off about the encounter. He took detailed notes of the event. First, he noted that the man commanding the ship did not strike him as a captain. Second, he noticed that the crew were milling around on the quarterdeck. This was a location that should have been strictly off limits to the crew. So why were they there? There didn't seem to be anything wrong with the ship. It was sailing perfectly other than the supposed captain calling out that the ship had lost their anchors. The ship appeared to be in sailing order. However, less than 48 hours later, the ship would be found undamaged, run aground at Diamond Shoals, the graveyard of the Atlantic. The Carrol A. Deering was a 5-masted schooner that was 255 feet long with 44-foot beams. It was launched on April 4, 1919, out of Bath, Maine. At a time when more and more commercial transports were becoming engine-powered, this was one of the largest commercial sailing vessels at the time. The ship successfully sailed for a full year before its final voyage came to an end in the Diamond Shoals of North Carolina. Diamond Shoals is a location off the coast of North Carolina at Cape Hatteras, consisting of ever-changing sandbars. These sandbars are underwater and for the most part cannot be seen by passing ships and are different with each passing changes in the current. Here, lightships are employed to mark the ever-changing dangers beneath the surface. Even so, the shoals are responsible for up to 600 shipwrecks and are known as the graveyard of the Atlantic. On July 19, 1920, the Deering set sail for Puerto Rico and picked up its cargo at Newport News, Virginia. The ship's captain was a World War I hero, William H. Merritt, who named his son Sewell first mate. He was recognized for bravery under fire for saving his entire crew when his World War I schooner was sunk by a German U-boat. He was an experienced and by all accounts a well-liked captain of his 10-man crew, of which were Scandinavians mostly made up of Danes. They set sail on August 26th for Rio de Janeiro to deliver their payload. However, just after the ship cleared the Virginia Capes, Captain Merritt became ill. The ship landed at Lewes, Delaware, where the captain and his son left to get medical help. This left the Deering without a captain or a first mate. Within a few days, the G.G. Deering Company hired a 66-year-old retired captain named Willis B. Wormel and first mate Charles B. McClellan to command the crew. These two officers were clearly experienced in their own right, but had never worked together. And working together on a ship for months on end, relationships are an integral piece of a successful voyage. Setting sail on September 8, 1920, Wormel captained the ship to Rio de Janeiro without incident. However, the working relationships between the crew, the first mate, and the captain had deteriorated. Captain Wormel gave the crew leave and met with an old friend, another captain named Goodwin. Captain Wormel confided in Captain Goodwin that his crew wasn't any good and discussed them with disdain. He also tells Captain Goodwin that he cannot trust his first mate, Charles McClellan. However, Captain Goodwin knows a man on board, the engineer Herbert Bates. Goodwin and Wormel know Bates well and agree that he is trustworthy, and if anything happens, Captain Wormel can trust Bates. On December 2nd, the Deering departed Rio for Norfolk, Virginia. On the way, they stopped in Barbados and the crew took leave. They all headed to the local pubs where McClellan partook in a few too many of the local beverages and became belligerent. He complained to another captain that he couldn't discipline the crew without Wormel interfering. He also stated that he had to do all of the navigating because the 66-year-old Captain Wormel's eyesight was deteriorating. The last straw was when he began stating that he was going to kill Captain Wormel before the trip was finished. He was arrested and thrown in jail. The next day, Captain Wormel had known what had occurred, but he needed a first mate, and despite their differences, he was not willing to leave McClellan in a Barbados jail. So Wormel bailed out McClellan, and they continued sailing back to Virginia. At 4:30 p.m. on January 29th, off the coast of North Carolina, Captain Jacobson of the Cape Lookout lightship spotted the Deering. The red-headed man with the beard and the accent, which was not Captain Wormel or First Mate McClellan, yelled out that the ship had lost its anchors. Furthermore, most of the crew was milling around on the quarterdeck where they shouldn't have been allowed. Captain Robertson later stated that the man on board didn't look, act, or speak like a captain. He was standing on the quarterdeck and all the crew was congregated there. Captain Robertson also later described the man, and the description did not match Captain Wormel or First Mate McClellan. However, nothing else on the ship looked out of order, and they didn't request assistance, so Captain Robertson took down his notes and let the Deering carry on. As the radio on the lightship was out, there was no way to immediately transmit the message. After the Deering sailed on, a steamship was seen leading in a similar direction to the Deering. The lightship signaled the approaching steamer that they had a message to relay to the steamer. They flew a flag indicating this. They also blasted their horn 4 times, which the steamer was well within distance of hearing. But the steamer did not approach the lightship to receive the message. Instead, the steamer dropped a canvas over the name of the ship, turned to the east, and accelerated away from the lightship. This ship remains unknown to this day. At 3:30 p.m. on January 30th, the crew of the USS Lake Elon spotted the Deering. Captain Henry Johnson of the Lake Elon later reported that the Deering was headed north-northwest, the sails were set, and everything looked good except for their heading. They passed the Deering about 25 miles southwest of the Diamond Shoals. The Deering appeared to be headed to Cape Hatteras. They were not worried about the Deering's direction, though, as the captain of the Deering should have noticed his error after seeing several other ships steering a course parallel with the Lake Elon. Furthermore, the weather and seas were clear, so the lookout on the Deering should see the Cape Hatteras lighthouse and the Diamond Shoals lightship. There was really nothing to worry about, as a competent captain would have easily navigated around the shoals given the many warnings in place. At 6:30 a.m. on January 31st, surfman C.P. Brady A. Gray was on lookout at U.S. Coast Guard Station Cape Hatteras when he spotted the Deering in rough waters in the Diamond Shoals. The Deering had run aground and was clearly in distress. The Coast Guard immediately deployed 2 powered surf boats to intercept the Deering and try to save the crew. However, the rough seas made it impossible to get within a quarter of a mile of the ship without putting themselves in danger on the shoals. Furthermore, they could get close enough to see the state of the ship. There were no people on board, and a ladder was hanging over the side, and there were no lifeboats that could be seen. The Coast Guard's first instinct was that the Deering had run aground and the crew had simply escaped using their lifeboats, so there was no need to risk boarding the ship in the rough seas, risking their own lives. Over the next few days, attempts were made to reach the ship without success, as the raging surf pushed them back. On February 4th, a tugboat gets to the Deering after the surf calms. They took notes of everything they found on the ship. The ladder was dropped over the side, and the motor lifeboat was gone. This was already suspected and was consistent with the idea that the crew had left the vessel after grounding. However, when they got to the galley, they began to find evidence of foul play. The crew had clearly been preparing a meal before they left and left with haste. All of the personal belongings of the crew and officers were missing. The ship's navigational equipment and logs were missing. The spare bed had been slept in. There were 3 different sized boots in the captain's cabin. The captain's chest and personal belongings were missing. The handwriting on the ship's map had changed on January 23rd. Red lights had been run up the mast. This was a signal for an out-of-control ship. And finally, the steering mechanism was disabled and charts were scattered all around the master's quarters. Some of these findings were consistent with the ship being out of control, running aground, and the crew escaping on the lifeboats. But some were not, and some were just simply strange. Why did the handwriting on the maps change on January 23rd? Why was the navigational equipment missing? Was the ship boarded by pirates or robbed? Why were the logs missing? Whoever was there last didn't want anyone to know what happened over the course of the previous days. Was there a mutiny? Based on the relationships and death threats in Rio de Janeiro and Barbados, it was possible. And the biggest mystery of all, where was the crew? On April 11th, Christopher Columbus Gray reported that he had found a message in a bottle on Buxton Beach in North Carolina. The message read, "Deering captured by oil-burning boat. Something like a chaser. Taking off everything. Handcuffing crew. Crew hiding all over ship. No chance to make escape. Finder, please notify headquarters, Deering." The letter was taken to Captain Wormel's widow as she knew some of the crew on the ship. She identified the letter as the handwriting of the engineer, Henry Bates. The bottle was also from Brazil, from which they had just returned. However, there were many that believed that the letter was fake. The crew had clearly left in an orderly fashion, yet the letter indicated being overrun and handcuffed. Furthermore, the letter requested notifying the G.G. Deering Company, not the Coast Guard or the police. Handwriting analysis later confirmed that the handwriting was not that of Henry Bates. At this point, the police put pressure on the man that found the bottle, Christopher Gray, accusing him of forgery, and after questioning Gray several times, he admitted to the forgery. He claimed that he had made the forgery in an attempt to gain notoriety with the public, leading to employment at the Cape Hatteras Light Station. Because of the strange circumstances and the fact that a sulfur freighter named the Hewitt had disappeared in the same area at the same time, the U.S. government launched an investigation into the missing crew. There were several large hurricanes in the area, but it was determined that both the Deering and the Hewitt were heading away from the hurricanes. They came up with two other plausible explanations for the disappearance of the crew. The first was piracy. The Deering could have been overtaken by pirates who stole the navigational equipment and other valuables on board the ship, then disposed of the crew. They would have also disposed of the lifeboats to make it look as though the crew had abandoned ship. Captain O.W. Parker of the United States Marine Shipping Board believed that this was the case. Piracy without a doubt still exists as it has since the days of the Phoenicians. At the time, there were several disappearances in the area, including the Hewitt, that could have been the work of pirates. The problem with the piracy theory is that it didn't explain the man driving the ship, as spotted by Cape Lookout Lightship and the change in handwriting for the navigational logs on January 23rd. Unless the man on the ship was a pirate and they were trying to steal the ship, but if the ship became out of control, why would they put up red lights indicating that they were out of control and asking for help? An alternate theory was that the crew mutinied. It was clear that there was a rift between Captain Wormel, First Mate McClellan, and the crew. This could explain the man that Captain Jacobson from the lightship saw that was clearly not Captain Wormel. It could also explain the disappearance of the crew. The crew's personal items, and the lifeboats. But where were the crew and the lifeboats? There have been several alternative theories proposed, such as Russian-backed communist pirates and Prohibition-era rum runners. There were reports of a New York City-based Communist Party planning to steal U.S. ships and sell them to the Soviet Union. Many staunchly anti-communist politicians in the U.S. believed that the Deering incident was related to these plans. Furthermore, this was during Prohibition, so bootleggers were selling alcohol off the coast, but it was unlikely that this relatively slow-moving and well-known ship would be a target of rum runners. Nevertheless, there has never been any evidence leading to either of these conclusions. Over the next couple of years, several men were found to be commercially sailing under the same or similar names as the lost crew. Upon investigation, they were either found to not be the lost crewmen of the Carrol A. Deering, or the men disappeared before their identities could be verified. No sign of the men or the lifeboats has ever been found. This is a mystery that has never been solved. This is True Mysteries. Please like, leave comments, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.